The Jewishness of the book of Revelation must be understood in order to correctly understand it. Welcome to As the Chaos Dies. The purging continues. The dissolution of all things is visible from here and draws near. The shaking grows stronger. The light purifies and intensifies as the chaos dies. The book of Revelation is so obviously Jewish, especially from chapters 4 and onward, that one scholar, as we mentioned previously, her name was Ford, she suggested that much of the book was written by John the Baptist. A few scholars have suggested that the book of Revelation was originally written in either Hebrew or Aramaic and then translated into Greek. Now, while I don't believe in either of those suggestions, it is crucial to recognize just how Jewish the book of Revelation is. R.H. Charles has famously stated, quote, "While he, John, wrote in Greek, he thought in Hebrew," end quote. Charles also believed that John frequently translated the Hebrew idioms literally into Greek. And this view is supported when we look at the grammar of the book of Revelation, which many scholars believe was written intentionally irregularly in order to express Semitisms and Septuagintalisms. So what does that mean? It means that in order to point to the Old Testament, John intentionally wrote in irregular Greek in certain places of the book. And R.H. Charles has claimed that Revelation contains more grammatical irregularities than any other Greek document of the whole ancient world. And Greg Beale says, quote, his purpose, and he's speaking here of John, not R.H. Charles, but John. So Beale says, quote, John's purpose was deliberately to create a biblical effect in the hearer, and thus to demonstrate the solidarity of his work with that of the divinely inspired Old Testament scriptures, end quote. So in other words, what Beale is saying there is that John intentionally wrote in such a way that when Revelation was read out loud, as it was intended to be according to chapter 1, verse 3, what the hearer would hear it in such a way that it would trigger the Old Testament scriptures in their minds. And that was intentional on John's part. And Beale goes on to say, quote, there is general acknowledgement that the Apocalypse contains more Old Testament references than any other New Testament book. The range of Old Testament usage includes the Pentateuch, Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, Psalms, Proverbs, Song of Solomon, Job, and the major and minor prophets. Roughly more than half the references are from the Psalms, Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel, end quote. Now, I myself am really interested to learn some of these references as we proceed. I've never heard that the book of Revelation was referring to the book of Judges or maybe 1st and 2nd Samuel, I guess because of David, but specifically the book of Judges. I've never heard of that as something that John was referencing in the book of Revelation. So as I'm learning and then presenting these videos, hopefully you all are blessed by them as well. That's something I'm really interested in learning as we go through this, is all these places in the Old Testament that John is referencing. R.H. Charles has said, quote, John had so profound a knowledge of the Old Testament that he constantly uses its phraseology not only consciously but even unconsciously, end quote. So John knew the Old Testament so well that it just came out when he was speaking and writing. The scholars, they argue back and forth whether he was intentionally quoting the Old Testament, intentionally referring to the Old Testament, or if it's just something that, so permeated him that it just came out without him necessarily intentionally referencing a specific passage in the Old Testament. But scholars debate as to whether Daniel or Ezekiel influenced the book of Revelation the most. And it's not only those two either, but Greg Beale believes that Daniel was the most influential on the book of Revelation. But even though that's his own personal view, he also states, quote, others have also recognized Ezekiel's broad influence, especially in Revelation 20 through 22, where the order of events appears to have been taken from Ezekiel 37 through 48, end quote. So in addition to those two, other scholars emphasize John's use of Isaiah, Exodus, and Zechariah as being models for Revelation. And in addition to John's direct use of the Old Testament, he also develops important Old Testament themes throughout the book, including Holy War and the Day of Yahweh. So I want to give a few examples of the use of the Old Testament in some of these ideas. So the idea of a theophany introducing judgment we see in Isaiah 6, Ezekiel 1, Daniel 7, the book of Nahum, and then the book of Revelation chapters 4 and 5. So again, where was John specifically drawing that idea from? Well, it could have been any or all of those passages, or even other ones. I'm sure there's more besides just those. The idea of little books or scrolls introducing judgment. Ezekiel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7, Daniel chapter 12, and then we see it echoed in Revelation chapter 5 and Revelation chapter 10. The lion from Judah exercising judgment is seen in Revelation 49 verse 9 and Revelation 5 verse 5. The Lord of Lords and King of Kings exercising judgment, Daniel 4:37 in the Septuagint, and then Revelation 17:14 and 19:16. Horsemen as divine agents of judgment, Zechariah chapter 1, Zechariah chapter 6, Revelation chapter 6. The Exodus plagues inflicting judgment, Exodus chapters 7 through 12, Revelation chapter 8, and Revelation chapter 16. Locusts as agents of judgment, Joel chapters 1 and 2, and then my view is that Gog and Magog also has locust imagery, and the book of Nahum also has locust imagery. But specifically, locust as agent of judgment, I would say would be Joel, and this is from Beale. He says Joel 1 and 2. I personally would add the the Gog and Magog invasion, as locust imagery is used there. And then in the book of Revelation, it's found in Revelation chapter 9. Prophets, the idea of prophets giving testimony through judgment, and that there's an awful lot there, but Beale mentions Exodus 17:17 and 1 Kings 17 verse 1, and then he references Revelation 11 verse 6. The idea of 10 days of tribulation is suggested in Daniel chapter 1 verse 12. Now that's when Daniel asked to be tested 10 days as to whether they could eat the vegetables instead of the king's food. So whether you would say that's 10 days of tribulation, 10 days of testing, but that could be linked with Revelation chapter 2 verse 10. 3.5 years of tribulation, Daniel 7:25, Daniel 12:7. I would also suggest the last few verses of Daniel chapter 9. And then link that with Revelation 11:2, 12:14, and 13:5. The ideas of Sodom, Egypt, and Jerusalem as infamous places where persecution occurs. Obviously Sodom and Gomorrah would be the book of Genesis. Egypt would be Exodus, and basically throughout the rest of the Old Testament, the prophets also mention Egypt. And then Jerusalem as a place of persecution. You could look at the days of Jeremiah. And I'm sure more than that. Again, this is not exhaustive. But then you could link that with Revelation 11 verse 8. Persecuting rulers symbolized as beasts would be Daniel 7. I would also say or suggest that the idea of the two beasts, the beast from the sea and the beast from the earth, in Revelation 13 is drawn from Job, where we have the descriptions of Leviathan, the sea monster, and Behemoth, the land monster, in the book of Job. I actually like that. Beale's doesn't mention that one, but I actually like that one a whole lot myself. And then obviously he links that with Revelation 11 through 13 and Revelation 17. We've discussed various times throughout the channel, specifically when we were going through the book of Nahum, the idea of Mystery Babylon and the Old Testament linkages of that, specifically Tyre, Nineveh, and Babylon. So that would be the writings of Ezekiel, Nahum, Isaiah, and Jeremiah. And then, of course, Mystery Babylon is found in Revelation 17 and 18. The book of Revelation also mentions Balaam, who is, his career is given to us in the book of Numbers. The book of Revelation also references Jezebel from 1 Kings. The book of Revelation also mentions the tree of life in Revelation chapter 2, 20, and 22. That's obviously from the book of Genesis. We see the idea of God's people being sealed in Ezekiel chapter 9 and Revelation chapter 7. We see the idea of the wings of an eagle in Exodus 19:4, Deuteronomy 32:11, and Revelation chapter 12. And then we see the idea of God's the victorious battle of God and his people over the enemy. The battle of Armageddon could be suggested in Zechariah 12, Zechariah 14, Ezekiel 38 and 39, and probably others, again, but this is not an exhaustive list. And obviously, these would link with Revelation 16 and 20. The idea of apostasy and the harlot. Jerusalem is described as a harlot in Exodus 16 and many other places. The book of Hosea is all about that. We could link that with Revelation 17 potentially, or, well, that would be actually linking it with Mystery Babylon, which again, this list is coming from Beale's commentary. I'm not a fan of that, actually, linking the harlot in that sense with Mystery Babylon, but I don't know, you guys can think about that, and you all can think about that and see if you like that idea. And then the idea of the Holy Spirit as the power source for God's people would be from Zechariah chapter 4 and Revelation chapters 1 and 11. So that's just an example. There's many, many, many more. Some have suggested that there's hundreds and hundreds of references and allusions to the Old Testament within the book of Revelation. So this is just, again, just a sampling. And so as we go through our verse by verse of the book, one of the things I'm really interested in is learning more about these Old Testament references, specifically where they are and how John is using them. So I'm really looking forward to that. So with that, I'm going to close out this piece of our introduction of the book of Revelation. If you like the content, want to help the channel grow, please subscribe and share the content. Give us a thumbs up. Thank you. I'll talk to you all very soon. God bless.